one part that they don't like is
No, they're close to us, right?
they don't like Jews.
Well, you're also American though.
They don't like you Americans too.
Okay, that's a good point.
They like Brazilians, soccer players, and people with money.
I don't even want to know the names.
I'm one of those.
Okay, so last week we had a great turnout, and now we'll see how many really, are enthused and how many were done after one class.
You know what Caleb told me?
What's that?
He said, and I don't want to say anything bad, but he's like, listen, 6 hours is a lot. $150, I don't know if that's really a big deal.
$30 an hour.
Yeah.
I know.
The math.
To each person different.
I told him he's stupid for that.
No, not stupid. Heaven forbid.
Vanessa's here. Moshe, open the door.
Oh. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello.
Oh, sorry.
Jeremy.
What's up?
Jeremy.
Nice. What's going on, doing?
Jeremy.
Oh, I forgot a pen. Anyone have a pen by chance? No, I didn't forget a pen.
Ah, perfect.
I knew I'd forget a pen, so I put it in my pocket before.
Are you okay? Are you sore from yesterday? How? And? Okay, no, I'll play the entire game. I'll play the entire game.
No, you're not gonna play the entire game.
No, I am. I am. We have a lot of guys.
No, it's probably
I'm gonna keep on trying. I don't care about money scoring. I'm gonna keep on helping, trying to help.
I think it was.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep on passing the ball.
I think it was. I think it was.
Yeah, he needs to understand that passing. That's
Judaism is never hands.
No, but
You
I
can't
think the
expect
class
a lot.
was.
Huh?
I think the class
I
was.
was like yelling from across the field, like, pass the ball.
He's not gonna know how to do that. He's not gonna make the cross. He's gonna pass on the ground. I told him when I passed him
Last
across
said it was
the ball when he was
canceled.
running.
Rabbi.
He's like, I'm not getting
Huh.
that.
Last
He's
said it was
like,
canceled.
a little
What's
faster,
canceled?
you get it.
The Tanya class.
Oh,
Is this the Tanya class?
No.
No, this is not the time.
It's the
That's what I'm
girls'
saying.
one, right? It's the girls' class.
I just found out that the class was canceled. So you'd be more than welcome to join us. It's going to be a short class.
That's a ton.
My class is called My Israel. This class is called My Israel.
Never checked that.
Oh. I know, she invited me to her party. I don't know if I'm going.
She invited you?
You're not going? Come on, man.
Are you
You're not
going?
party? Yeah, of course.
I don't fucking walk all the way there. I also have a frat of it. I'm just kidding, I don't know. Oh. So I'm feeling you got invited? You got invited? You're not going to hers?
No, I told her I had another birthday.
You're so
I got
mean.
invited to another birthday.
You're so mean.
You should have just been like, I'm busy. You don't gotta go.
Yeah, you don't gotta be like, actually, I like someone else more.
Yeah, I like someone else more
It's the
than.
first-
Wow, Vanessa.
It's
No,
the
that's
first
true.
person. It's the first person that invites me.
Can you write my
I
name?
go.
I don't know.
No,
That's pretty rude.
I split them in half. I get.
She said no to someone else because she's already going to another party. You gotta say, you just can't.
No, not Jeremy. You get mildly effed
Exactly,
off at
that's
one
what I
party,
said.
and then you go to the one that
Exactly.
you want to be
You're
at.
both. You gotta.
You go to the one that you want to be at the most.
Excuse me, I'm not gonna walk 25 minutes to go to her place.
Where'd you walk from? I just.
okay.
I can drive you.
Okay.
All right, so we'll start, and if the others go with God's help, join us. So join us.
I saw it on the side of the road.
All right, just let me know.
I'll wait 2 more
I
minutes.
drove through.
We're gonna have to walk all the way back. Yeah, we already have a lot of booths. You
Yeah,
don't
but I
need.
don't want to keep drinking the houses.
No, we need you.
Get some athletes.
I also have a bunch of bruises.
Um,
I want to lose all my money and call it a donation to a frat.
Do they just appear? I really think all bruises on girls just appear out of nowhere.
I don't know.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah. This is how we ended the last class.
One girl,
Go.
I was on a. Actually, guys, like, I don't know why this girl was playing, but she made me fall down. She juked me inside.
My brother made me time with a girl.
But she was really good though.
Did he actually?
You could call that piece of paper the general theme of the whole course.
It was very
I got kicked
impressive.
by a girl in
Yeah, that
basketball.
shit was so
No,
funny.
not cooked. No,
Thank you
but
again.
like
I'm
she
sorry.
Of course,
took
I didn't know
the
that was
Remind me your name?
Right,
Jesse.
all the
Jesse, right by
beautiful
Moshe.
form, and then I put one of the
No, no
girls
problem.
that's
Pleasure,
like,
please.
guard her
The more the merrier.
You don't like.
You just said it right now.
Yeah.
Like we'll zone and then you just.
Okay, holy homies.
I have to go to the gym after.
Shall we begin?
Yes.
When?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not drinking.
With Justin's permission, we shall begin. Okay. So, meaning this with all seriousness, I want to quickly say a real nice thing about one of my teachers, whose yard site, whose day of passing we're celebrating today. Rabbi Yoshua Gordon, Zichron Livracha, is kind of like the father of online Torah learning within the Chabad movement. Chabad.org is loaded up with thousands of hours of this person's classes. I never had the pleasure of meeting this person in real life. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I learn roughly an hour and a half to 2 hours a day listening to this person speak. I do a lot of audio sharing when I do, you guys know I do the drives. And there's many rabbis up for grabs, as it were. And Rabbi Gordon had a very unique skill, and he's a very funny person and an unbelievably brilliant mind and a wonderful man. And so we're going to dedicate our efforts in this class in his memory, a person who dedicated his life to spreading Torah with such immensity and such skill. So we'll try a little extra focus, a little extra encouragement. If this person were to ask anything of us, I would like to think it would be similar to what I had asked in the last class, that we should at least walk away with something that really helps us connect with God and Judaism. And if we walk away with one thing, then we were successful, and we'll make, hopefully, Rabbi Gordon proud. So, welcome everyone. How was everyone's week?
It was tough, man.
Tough? Mine was also a little tough. Tell me why.
Too much work.
Too much work? Did you get it done? Okay, so we're going to talk about
Why
that.
is it tough?
We're going to talk about expectations and whether or not we can meet them in this class. But you set an expectation and you met it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so right now it feels terrible, but tomorrow morning, knowing that you got all that done, how's it going to feel?
It's gonna feel great.
It's going to feel great.
Yeah.
Let's keep that in mind. Everyone else, good week so far?
It was long, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're coming to Shabbos. One more day, Ezra Shem.
Mad.
So this week's class, we're going to talk about Jewish leadership. What it means to be a Jewish leader. And again, how that ties in with the land of Israel. We spoke last week about Moses, about his desire to enter the land with the Jewish people. We spoke about how the land of Israel is not just a physical land that God promised us because it's very nice beachside property, which it is, Baruch Hashem. A country the size of New Jersey, for the record, that has desert, forest, and snow, all in one, which geographically and logically doesn't seem to make much sense. It's in a very unique position in the world. And very, very unique land, we understand, but there's more to it than just that. So we spoke last week about the spiritual idea of the land of Israel, about how the land of Israel represents the Jewish people's ability to fulfill its mission in this world. And when we are struggling, so to speak, to fulfill our mission, so we're not necessarily fully in the land of Israel, like right now, but that when the Jewish people were successful in history in fulfilling their mission to God, their time in the land was that much better, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, we're going to begin like this. I want to start with actually exactly what Noah said. Noah says he had a really difficult week, Baruch Hashem, but he got a lot done. Okay? So let's try to practically put this in our own lives. How many of us have started off a week, and we have a big week, right? We have lots to do, and we set the bar high, and then we don't necessarily fully meet that expectation. Okay? And we've probably also had those weeks where we have met that expectation, right? And then, like Noah, we're going to wake up tomorrow feeling great. Okay. And then, how many times have we got a week where we not only didn't meet the expectation, we didn't show up to the expectation, we can barely spell the word expectation, it was a totally different week, completely outside of anything that was planned for maybe reasons inside of our control, maybe whatever it might have been. Anyone? So, we understand the distinction between idealism. Welcome, welcome. We understand the difference between idealism and a person hopes to achieve, and inevitably what they end up achieving, and we understand that this does not make that a bad person. Is that fair to say? If I set a goal at the beginning of the week to give $10,000 in charity, and by the end of the week I gave, welcome, welcome, I gave $7,000 in charity. Am I a bad person?
No.
Probably not, right? I gave $7,000 in charity that week. It wasn't maybe as much as I wanted, but those are good things, right? So, having said that, if I need $10,000 this month to pay my rent so that my family has a place to live, and I only get $7,000 out of the $10,000, so now it's a little different, right? Not so much, at least I have at least I have $7,000. I only have $3,000 to go, but in that way, there's a bar that needs to be met, and now it wasn't met at all. Welcome, welcome. And now we have a potential issue. Yes? Okay. Now, who's ever been in that circumstance before? They have, I know you guys are young, thank God, and college students, and have not in general, let's say, been required to pay rent or have bills, etc. But who here has had an obligation that they had to meet at a certain date, And then by the date, it's okay. By the date, not necessarily fully meet the obligation. Who of us have ever had that? Let's try it again. I saw everyone got distracted for a second. Who here has ever been hired for a job, a short-term job, and they were told, get away from me, I'll see you Friday. And by the time Friday comes and the boss shows up, he's not happy. It's not fully done in his mind. Your mind maybe thought it was done. It wasn't fully done in his mind, okay? And he's very upset. Now, the person who, let's say, didn't satisfy the boss's requirements, the boss is going to yell, the boss is going to this, the boss is going to that, but it's going to be based on the individual, how they respond, right? And we can understand this very simply, that pick 5 random people in this room, let's put them all up against a wall, and Rabbi Moshe, heaven forbid, will start yelling at them, and one's going to laugh, and one's going to cry, and one's going to this, and everyone's going to react differently, right? So it's about the individual. Heaven forbid, I'm not yelling at anybody, I don't know what you I'm just saying an idea. So my ability to process my own failure, someone else's failure, all these different things, is unique to each individual thing, right? Okay. Now what about as an entire nation? Last week we talked about the land of Israel is not just this party town. We are going to the land of Israel and we have a job to do. And we know from Jewish history, the Jewish people were not always perfect at fulfilling the job. But how did we respond? How did we react when we were not so good at fulfilling the job? Let's talk about it. So, we will now discuss, or introduce rather, our first leader when we entered the land, post-Moses, Yehoshua in Hebrew, Joshua, okay? Joshua was known, it says in the Gemara, that Moshe was like the sun and Joshua like the moon. And what the Gemara goes to explain, what do you mean by this? 2 things. One, in immensity. Moshe was a person in a different degree of strength, of wisdom, of humility, of all these different things. And, the moon is obviously a very significant, especially relative to man, object, thing in the sky. But not nearly as much so as the sun, but still very, very relevant. So Yehoshua was like the moon, relative to Moses is like the sun. That's the one explanation. The other explanation is that Yehoshua was such a good student, he was such a proper, devoted student to Moses, that he had no actual light, so to speak, of his own. He had nothing to offer of his own. Everything he had to offer was a reflection of what he had learned from his teacher Moses, that he was a perfect student. Like the sun, or rather like the moon is to the sun. The moon doesn't give its opinion. The moon takes the light of the sun, it bounces right off, objectively, so to speak. That was like Yehoshua. So we started off real strong. We had a Moses, and Moses served as the mamish, literally the king of the Jewish people, but he served in every role of leadership within the Jewish nation, so to speak, at the top level, besides Aaron, his brother, who was the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. So quickly, we will discuss the 4 general sections of authority, you might say, in the Jewish nation. So we have legalese, right? We have Torah. Torah is a book of laws. Heaven forbid a person, Shmuli takes from Moshe, and Moshe is very upset, and they don't know how to, so they go to a beit din, they go to a court, and they come to solve it. And Torah prescribes what the answer to the question is. So in this we have, in the Jewish system, what is known as a Sanhedrin. This is a Supreme Court, 71 Supreme Court justices, 71 Yidden, 71 Jews, Gedolim, Chachamim, the wise, the greats of the generation, would sit and judge the most difficult cases. And then the breakup into minor courts, very similar to what you might imagine our federal system looks like. You have the big court, minor courts for smaller issues, local courts, and then appeal courts, and all these sorts of things. Okay, we have the ritual. So we had a temple. You go to the temple, you make sacrifices, everything regarding that. We said before, Kohanim, right? The priests, the Leviim, this whole class of individuals served God in a very special way. They were, we say devoted to God. We're all devoted to God. What do we mean devoted to God? We mean when it comes to worldly matters, they didn't have, we'd say shaykhis, they didn't have a connection in the same way a regular Jew does. Their responsibility is to maintain to a greater degree the spirituality in this world. They worked at the temple. And then even within that, that's the Levites. And even within that, there was a very special group of people called the Kohanim. This was the priests of the Jews, but specifically within the class of the Levites. And they were in charge of the rituals. Okay. Then there's moral and spiritual leadership. You want to enthuse the Jewish people. You want to get them excited. You want to tell them, rebuke them, but in a kind way, right? If you love someone and you see they're doing wrong, you're not going to yell at them because you're upset at the action they're doing for whatever, you're going to do it because of your love for that person, because it's going to harm them to continue that action. So the Jewish nation as a whole would have an individual like this called a prophet. This could be a man, this could be a woman, and this would be a person who is so internally connected to God and so internally pure that they can recognize the bigger picture, they can see where the Jews are making mistakes, and they can try to correct them and not become angry. And meaning, even if they become angry, it's a holy anger. It's all out of love. It's all out of goodness and kindness and compassion, and this is called a prophet. So this is the third section, and for all of Jewish history, we had these three super down pat. Like, since Abraham till Moses himself, even in exile, even in Egypt. So these three sections would have been pretty clear cut, right? Who's in charge of the legal Torah? The scholars, the ones who are smartest. Like, it's kind of obvious, right? Like, in other words, if there's a question here, so the smart guy figures it out. Ritual law, same thing. There was always a Levite class. Even in Egypt, they would remain, so to speak, not enslaved, and they would have their own customs and traditions, and we knew this, and it would have been obvious, and we would have maintained it with much more ease. And our moral and spiritual leadership, we know that in every generation from Yosef HaTzadik, from Joseph, the child of Jacob who led the Jewish people after Jacob had passed in the land of Egypt, and then Yosef passes, and it's Levi who leads the Jewish people, and then his oldest son, and all the way down till Moses. So throughout Jewish history, we see a consistent spiritual leadership as well, where the prophet is there. When the Jews do something wrong, the prophet is there to correct. Okay, what's the fourth? It's very relevant to today. Politics. We're going to war. We're trying to make peace deals with this country. We're trying to do business with these people, and who's going to represent the Jews? Okay, so we had a Moses, a completely incorruptible, the perfect representative of any people, right? If you're lucky to have him. Okay, but you don't get Moses forever. Next we had Yehoshua, who as a humble servant of Moses also served as a perfect political leader. So when the Jews first cross over the Jordan and we enter the land of Israel, topic of this class, the land of Israel, started off real strong. All four categories, solid, okay? And then we enter an era of Jewish history that was not so solid. And we're going to try to understand, in other words, we read these areas of Jewish history, we read about the stories of the prophets and of the Jewish people not obeying God and God punishing the Jewish people. And the first question that most people ask is, what's up with this whole, you're telling me God loves us so much? God seems pretty hardcore, right? God's punishing and this, that, and the other. Out of context, actually even in context, God is pretty hardcore. I'm not going to say he's not, but out of context, for sure, it seems like God's got some weird spike thing going on. And the God who is perfect and can't be upset by anyone is upset all the time, and it's not adding up. But much like a parent who is upset watching a child hurt themselves, so God is upset watching the Jewish nation not satisfy their mission in this world, right? So we're going to enter the land of Israel. We have the leader, Yehoshua, Joshua, taking us in. So still at the forefront, for all the Jews entering the land of Israel, all four categories, so to speak, of leadership, of the way the Jewish people will function as a unit, is being satisfied by this great leader. What's going to happen next? So we have an era in Jewish history known as the prophets. And in the era of the prophets, we're going to bring a pasuk here, we're going to bring a line from Judges 21:25. Vayamim mahem ein melech b'Yisrael, ish hayasher beinav yaseh. In those days, there was no king in the land of Israel, and what each person thought was right unto themselves, like each person as a king unto themselves did what they thought was right unto themselves. Each person was a king in their own eyes. Can we relate to this in 2024? I would say so, right? In general, I think most human beings kind of live in the way where there is no moral authority other than the voices in their own head. Unless I know it's right, okay. So the Jewish people went from Moses within a very short period of time to that attitude. So how do you get this nation? First a family. Then what's the term? I forgot the other term, but not quite a nation yet, but larger than a family. We become a larger unit, right? And then eventually a nation. And a nation is something else, right? America as a nation has a constitution. We have a flag. We fight for certain principles. We have a history. So to every nation in the world. So when the Jewish people became a nation to take the land of Israel, a nation that's goal is to bring godliness into the world. So we're seeing consistently how these two things tie in. And in the era of the prophets specifically, how when the Jewish people served God well, inspired and unafraid, or rather brave and not befallen to their own insecurities and their own egos and fears, So the Jewish people did very well in the land. And if we allowed ourselves to succumb to our lesser instinct, we would do less well, and God would send a corrective force in the form of a neighboring enemy. The text here wants me to bring up, and I will bring it up because it's interesting. The Philistines, Philistia is literally an ancient enemy of the Jewish people that operated and lived inside the land that's now known as Gaza. And we understand not only historically like the trauma they posed to the Jewish people in the, so to speak, day-to-day struggle, but how this is all related and intertwined, spiritually speaking, with the Jewish people's struggle to conquer the land of Israel. What's conquering the land of Israel? Conquering their mission, conquering their ability to be confident in doing their mission in this world. Even today, for people like us, right? What's your guys' mission this year, let's say? You're in school. You have to graduate. There are certain things you simply have to do. There are parties. Yes, everyone likes parties. Football games. Everybody's going to a football game when they can. There are certain things you guys just simply have to do, whether you like it or not. And you, like me, even you guys, this is not me telling you this. This is probably the way, to a certain degree, you see it in your own head. Okay, I can't go to the party this week. I just have this thing to do. And it's almost like when you explain it to a friend, they understand why, because if they were in that situation, they also would miss the party, right? There are certain standards we all kind of generally live by. For you guys, it's completing your homework and showing up for certain tests, right? You don't just skip a test because there's a party, or skip completely studying for a test because maybe you study more the next morning, or but there's certain things we just have to do in life, yes? So for the Jewish people to accept that in their hearts and souls, every generation, every child who didn't necessarily go through the splitting of the sea, who didn't see the drama of 40 years of being taken through the desert with the leader Moses, who are sort of, so to speak, born into this story. Every generation with the exact same struggle. This is apparently my personal mission. Doesn't feel that way. It's not. And in every generation, there are priestly classes. They're the best amongst us. They're the lowest amongst us. In exactly the same situation, so to speak, happening now. 3,335 years, we've been going through the same thing. But if we could look at it historically, we can more understand what we're coming to today and what we're struggling with today. And again, even today, what it means to conquer the land of Israel. So, hi, how are you? No, it's not. The time class is canceled actually for tonight, but we have a class going on now if you'd like to join us. Okay. So now we are going to switch. We're going to transition from the era of the judges, a tumultuous era. Please. A tumultuous era. To name, just right now, a famous judge, Shimshon, Samson, who I'm sure many of you have heard of, who had fought the Philistines, specifically terrorized the Philistines for years because of their torment of the Jewish people, and ultimately was killed in the process. But this, again, would have been a living, breathing example of every single Jew having an opportunity to see what a Jewish person who's committed to their mission is capable of doing in the land of Israel. We had prophets, we had leaders, but what did we not have? We didn't have a king. Which nowadays, even mention the idea of a king, it's a no-go. Kings, that's for England. In America, we don't have kings, which in many ways is a good thing, thank God. Back in the day, a king was the standard practice. If you want to be a nation and you don't have a king, this is being a professional football player without a right arm. I mean, not the kicker. You understand? This is ridiculous. It's a silly notion. Nations have kings. And eventually, after a few 7 generations of the struggle as the newly formed Jewish nation, land of Israel, we came to the prophet Samuel and demanded a king. Now, what is a king? We discussed before those 4 pillars. We have the pillar of Torah, right? The pillar of laws, of understanding all the different laws that Torah breaks down in the way that we're supposed to behave with one another and with God. So we have courts for this, yes? If heaven forbid one person, we said before, Shmuley takes from Moshe, and Moshe doesn't know if he can't remember exactly what occurred, so we go to a beis din, we go to a court, we figure it out. And just very much like the, let's say, federal court systems we have today, back in the day when we had a Sanhedrin, which would have been a Jewish Supreme Court, there would have been much more minor courts spread throughout all the different lands, and local courts, and appeal courts, and all these different processes. Okay, we spoke about the ritual leadership. We spoke about that the Jewish people also had a spiritual relationship with God and with the land, and when they did a sin, so they'd have to bring a sacrifice, and you would need guidance and understanding on how to do these things, and there'd be a spiritual class to help us do this. These were called the Levites, led by the Kohanim, led by the priests. And then we spoke about, I don't want to go back to the page, let me go back. We said Torah, we said ritual, and moral leadership, right? And we had the prophets. Even in that generation we were just discussing. We always had the leadership of inspiration in front of, we had that option, so to speak, if I'm uninspired, to go find the prophet and become inspired. But we didn't have kingship, we didn't have political or military leadership, okay? So the Jewish people come to the prophet Samuel, and they demand a prophet. And after much deliberation and back and forth, Samuel understanding spiritually why it wasn't necessary yet for the Jewish people to have a prophet, or rather to have a king, and the Jewish people feeling unable to fulfill their mission without a king in the land of Israel. So God ultimately agreed, and the first king is installed, and his name is Shaul, Saul. And now we enter a real deeper conversation of what it means Jewish leadership. Up till this point, every single Jewish leader, objectively a perfect person, to the nth degree. Not even just perfect in the sense where they didn't commit any mistakes, but had some flaws on the inside. A different degree of perfect. Moses was not capable like us of committing simple, ordinary sins against God. A different sort of person. Now we're talking about, although amazing people, and incredible people, and brilliant people, and the leaders of the Jewish people, we're talking about people. We're talking about real human beings, so to speak, who are and I don't want to say that's not necessarily fully true, still not relevant to us, still the greats and still a different generation, but we're talking about relative to Moses himself, we're now talking about regular people. And the first one, his name was Saul. And what was the problem with Saul? Saul is the first king of the Jewish peoples like this. Saul, first of all, it says, was a head taller than every other yid. Standing in a crowd, you can see him a mile away. He's the handsomest. He's very well spoken, brilliant. He was the valedictorian in high school. He played on every single sports team, varsity, etc. Every single trophy. This was a mother's very, very proud child. Okay, in only a positive way. This was a very successful, well put together individual, and he, so to speak, in that way, a very wonderful representation of the Jewish people. What's the problem with Saul? Saul made lots of mistakes, or even let's just say a few mistakes. And Saul was not able to cope with that reality. Saul's ego, his inability to exist in a place where he had made a mistake and owes apologies, has to make it right. Literally, he was unable to exist, at least in the great scale of things, in that state. And this was, and is, not just for the Jewish king, but for every single human being, an immensely fatal flaw. And for this person, he literally lost his mind. We understand, we've all heard of King David. We read King David's Tehillim, his book of Tehillim, his poetry to God. Many of us every day, but for those who come for Shabbat, on Friday nights we do a little. During the Friday night services, Saturday, for those who come Saturday morning, we do plenty. So we talk about King David a lot. We don't talk about his predecessor so much. Why? Because King David, so to speak, is the correction. He was the correction. Everything that Saul lacked in his leadership, David had. Saul's inability to be humble. Now, I don't want to say be humble. Again, we're talking about very immense people who went through very immense circumstances, right? It's different, for example, it's a lot easier for me to apologize for being late to this class than it is for the President of the United States to apologize for something he did wrong. Does that make sense? In other words, how upset are you really going to be at me that I'm late? So that's kind of an easy thing to apologize for. But apologizing for extra civilian casualties, heaven forbid, in a crisis, so this is a much, much different, much more serious thing. So I'm talking about Saul, the leader of the Jewish people, who had some very serious things on his agenda, and for those most serious things, he wasn't able to apologize. I'm not saying he's not humble, I'm saying he lacked the great, great, great humility that would have been required to be able to say, truly, even as the leader of the Jewish people, even as literally, objectively, the smartest, tallest, strongest, most well-fit, most well-equipped, most well-suited for the position Jew in the world, I done messed up. Couldn't say it. Couldn't find that place. Seriously messed up. Against God, and he lost his mind. Okay. And so comes, again, I've jumped a little back and forth, but before this happened, while Saul was still king, we know there's a story, a very famous Jewish story, David and Goliath. And this story, in the Jewish tradition, is really the starting point of when David becomes the king of the Jewish nation. Because this story highlights the truth not only about who David was, but of what Saul lacked and what the Jewish people lacked, and what David was going to bring to the Jewish nation. A real, what you'd say, the essence of Judaism, not the externalities, not the green Ferrari with the very, very loud V7, V8 engine, or whatever. The surprisingly, incredibly put together police car that looks like it's maybe $40,000, but it goes actually 180 miles an hour down the highway if it needs to catch the bad guy. Not a great metaphor, but substance versus flash is what I was going for. Shaul was a little more flash. David is the epitome of substance. So to give a little background, one day the Jewish people are fighting to conquer the land of Israel. Yes, slowly but surely, making great strides, mind you. This is towards the end when we're about to basically conquer the land, and we're in this very similar to today's place called Gaza, and there's this amazingly large, angry military force that is notoriously hateful to Jewish people called the Philistines. They mock the Jewish people. They think our whole lifestyle is ridiculous and that our whole way of life is absurd, and they want us dead. They cannot stand us around. And they have their big giant Goliath, who they bring out, and it says in the Medrash that for 3 whole days, this giant stood there. 2 armies, the Jewish army and the Philistine army, and this giant mocked the Jewish people. Oh, a nation of God! A nation, saying really harsh, significant things. A nation of God, and all your claims, and your Torah, and the people of Moses. Come get it, son! And that's it. He mocked them for days. And King David, 3 days. King David at the time is he's a water carrier for the king. It's nobody. Doesn't even have a suit of armor. Every single Jewish male over the age of 18 years old would have had a suit of armor, would have been there for the military, would have been in the camp. David, I believe at the time, I want to say he was 17, but I'm not sure. But he was not in, or it could have been that he was a little older, but again, he served as a steward for the king of Israel, and he was a smaller fella. No one took him seriously as a soldier. And David, for 3 days straight, is watching as this giant is mocking the people, and David comes and brings water for the king. Right? So he gets into the meeting, and he's in the meeting, and he's not supposed to be, so to speak. He's not there to listen, but he's listening. And what are they arguing about? King, Saul, what are we going to do? All the Jewish generals, the Jewish leaders. He mocks us in front of our God, in front of our people. We're demoralized. So look at the people of Moses. He's right. Look at us. We're already scared. What are we going to... King says, what am I supposed to do? None of us are capable of killing him. We have to figure out a plan, but I don't know. 3 days being mocked. Goliath is standing mocking the Jewish people, and King David can't take it. Finally, he walks into the tent, bringing the water to the king. I'll fight him! Cowards, clowns, I'll fight him! It's enough. You let him talk about the Jews, you let him talk about our God this way. I'll fight him. Get out of here, little kid. They try to throw him out. What are you No, enough. I'll fight him. Interesting little bit of Jewish history here. Shaul, maybe not in the best spiritual and emotional place, says to himself, I never really liked this kid anyway. Prophet tells me he's going to be king after me. Let's find out. Go, buddy. Fight the giant. I believe in you. Take my armor. It's going to go great. Take it. Literally, right? King David says, fine. Knowing full well, this guy's trying to send me to my death. Watch me. King David puts on the giant armor. Doesn't even come close to fitting. King Shaul, very, very tall guy. King David, exactly opposite. Whatever, puts on the whole garb. Steps out inside in front of the Jewish army. Steps out in front of the Jewish camp and starts making his way towards Goliath. Not with a sword. Left the sword behind. Takes his staff. And the end of the staff is a sling. It says in the Medrash, we know, so Goliath doesn't know this at the time, but we know that little old David, when he was a youngster, working on the farm for his mommy and tati, so he used to wrestle bears in the woods. This is a real thing. He was a ridiculously strong and physically capable and athletic person for his size. Whenever he was a little fellow. And he approaches Goliath, taunting, this is the best the Jews can send. Look at him. He's tiny. He's nothing. We're going to take them. Riling up his people. And to try to give a perspective, in other words, the base perspective we hear the story. King David says, we'll do the line right now. King David says, Vayomer David el ha-plishti. And David said to the Plishti, Ata ba'elai becherev uvachonis v'chidain v'neichi ba'alecha b'shem Hashem tzvayis elokei marchis Yisrael asher charafta. That you come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come to you with the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, who you have taunted. And David runs towards Goliath, grabs a rock off the ground, pulls back the sling, lets it go, right in the forehead, and he's dead. David cuts off his head, takes Goliath's head, throws it into the crowd of Philistines. The Jewish nation, watching all this go down, grab their swords and start charging, and the Philistines run, terrified, and they know that that's it. And the Jewish people win the battle and win the day. And every single Jew on that day knew, this guy might say he's the king, but David's the king of Israel. Why? Again, he killed him with a stone. David didn't jump up his back and slit his throat. Hypothetically, anyone with the courage and the bravery could have grabbed that stone and grabbed that sling and ran for it. David was the smallest amongst them. He had no right. He was not even a soldier. He was a steward. But when there's something broken in the world, and there's something that needs to be done, and no one's willing to do it. So it doesn't matter about my lacking. A job needs to be done. A king, a man, you might say in the American linguist, a person who has, I didn't mean to say a man, a person of conviction, a person who's willing to fight and die for what they believe in. It's not about where I land on the issue, not about my capabilities. I'm going to go fight Goliath. And he won. And it wasn't, in other words, the Jewish people would have seen on that day, it wasn't that the little guy suddenly had incredible strength. He did have incredible strength. He had it beforehand. God was with him. All of our fears about fighting, we could have taken, God was with this guy. He's with us too, but we're not. In other words, David had that thing, that faith, that they didn't have. And David was the king. Okay. So, through many a circumstance, I want to bring something very interesting here, but we're going to go on to say that through many a circumstance, David finishes his kingship, and King Solomon becomes the king of the nation of Israel after him. I'm going to tell you two quick stories. Okay, first we're going to say like this. There's a story of King David that he was on the run. There was a certain time where Saul, knowing David was going to be the next king, wanted to kill him, and David was on the run. He was hiding amongst the Philistines. And he feigns, we say in English, insanity. He fakes being crazy to escape. Okay, we have the pasuk here somewhere. I'm so sorry. I was in the beginning. Got it. 3 psukim. LeDavid b'shanaisi es tamai lifnei Avimelech vayigarshehu vayelach. Right, we say this in davening. Avarcha Hashem b'chol es tamei tilasei b'fi be'Hashem tishal nafshi yishmu anavim v'yismachu. Of David when he disguised his sanity before Avimelech, whereupon he drove him out and then he departed. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise is always in my mouth. My soul boasts of the Lord. May the humble hear and rejoice. So it's a story of King David that he had a fake insanity. And at a certain point, the Philistines, they thought that King David, so to speak, had, for whatever reason, they knew he had some trouble, that he was amongst them, and they were looking for him. And when they finally took this person that they knew was King David, and they brought him before the king, so it turns out that the king of the Philistines, he himself had a crazy brother, and he couldn't take it anymore. He says, I need another crazy person on my side, get this guy out of here. And they take King David, hey, he can't be the king. And King David survives. Okay? What does Chassidus explain about this story? Jewish philosophy and spirituality. It explains like this. The only way a person, heaven forbid, can sin against God is if an actual spirit of insanity, a ruach shtus, comes upon them. That any sane person who understood the truth of God and godliness and how much he loves you and how he creates you every moment to do what's best for you and how, heaven forbid, a person would never want to separate from that God. So any person in this perfectly sane state of mind, it only can be an actual insanity that comes upon the person that they're able to sin against God. And says Chabad Lubavitch and the Chabad Rebbeim, this is how every Jew sins at any point. Even the smallest sin, it's literally a spirit of insanity. Because if they were a sane person, wouldn't do this thing. So in other words, definitely don't hate your fellow Jew, heaven forbid, when you see them sin. Have sympathy. There's a sense of insanity. So what does this story teach? How King David's life was saved by faking insanity. So Chassidus explains there's 2 types of insanity. There's ruach shtus, And then there's shtus to kedusha. There's the insanity of bringing this. There's the spirit of folly, and then there's bringing folly to holiness. And it's actually from that same ability of being, so to speak, insane, from that place where I have the capability of just being insane, that it's from this place a person is capable of actually developing new spiritual heights in the form of kedusha and holiness, when they're able to take that energy and use it for good things. In other words, the insanity that causes a person to do crazy, insane, ridiculous things is negative. So it's this same, so to speak, energy that a person can utilize to allow them to do crazy, positive things all the time. Right? Why do all the crazy stories that we do? I have a crazy man. Crazy man gives all his money to charity because he loves God so much he wants to do kind gesture. That's also possible. And we could do that as well. So King David was taught that lesson from this. If you want to spiritually go infinite levels, you need to be infinitely a little spiritually crazy in holiness. You have to do extreme things. That was the lesson King David was taught here by God. Okay. And now, quick story about King Solomon. King Solomon became the second king of the nation of Israel. King David was a warrior. God wanted that, the whole idea of King David's success in conquering the land of Israel so a temple can be built, and that's how the Jewish people are going to satisfy their mission, right? The whole point of Israel is to satisfy the mission, and the temple is an intricate part of the mission. So, why doesn't God let King David build the temple? Because King David's a warrior, killed a lot of people in his time, and the temple's going to be a place of peace, a place where all the nations are going to come and gather, and a man of peace has to be the one to build the temple. David's very upset about this, but he understands, and it's his son who's going to be the one to build the temple. Okay. Quick story. 2 Jews come before King David. They have an issue. One Jew says, like this, we're at a party. One day, me and my homie were at a party. The 2 Jews came before the king, King David. And the one Jew says, our friend here was really hungry. And the second he sat down, he started eating. Not a big deal. But he ate his whole plate. And by the time the king finally walks in, the guy looks up, he realized no one else in the party had eaten anything. He's the only one. He's got an empty plate, and he feels embarrassed. And he looked at me, and he said, give me your egg, please. I'll give it back to you. I just want to put it on my plate so I don't feel silly. I'm the only one sitting without food. They're going to know I ate all my food. I don't want to, It's no problem. Puts the egg on his plate. Says, but I forgot about the egg that I gave him and I left. King David says, okay, what's the problem? He says, well, I give him an egg. He never gives me my egg back. Eggs make chickens. Maybe my chicken makes more eggs. Maybe those eggs make more chickens. Look at how much money I lost out because I gave this guy an egg and he didn't give it back to me. Homie to the left is like, dude, he gave me an egg. I'm kind of freaking out. And he doesn't know. King David is a little stumped. He says, come back tomorrow. I want to think about this one. Come back tomorrow. King David used to take all sorts of troubles in his court. He says, come back tomorrow. King Solomon was listening the whole time. And he's shocked. This is 7-year-old King Solomon, 5-year-old King Solomon, little kid. He's shocked. To him, the answer seems obvious. But his father didn't see it. He has an idea. His father, King David, every single morning, he likes to go about the town and check on the Yidden, check on the Jews. Gets a stroll, 2-hour stroll, he goes in the car, goes to check on everybody. And he knows he checks by this farmer every single day. So King Solomon goes that night and he goes to the farmer. He says, tomorrow morning, I want you to take these peas, these cooked peas, and I want you to, when my father comes by, King David, I want you to start digging and openly plant the cooked beans into the ground. Okay? The guy looks at King Solomon, he's like, little kid, what do you want from me? He's, please, just trust me. He's like, all right, little kid, I'll do what you say. Next morning, King David starts his stroll, and he sees this farmer. Farmers are smart, right? At the very least, at what they do at farming. Farming is not an easy thing. They know what they're doing. And King David is watching this farmer, a successful farmer, taking cooked food product, the cooked peas, and planting them in the ground. And King David is just flabbergasted. He walks up to the farmer, a big smile on his face. He says, my holy brother, I have to ask. You understand cooked peas are not bringing you more peas. You need the raw pea to plant for more pea. What are you doing? Right? And the farmer says to King David, so if my cooked peas can't bring me more pea plants, so how is his cooked egg going to bring him more chickens? King David was blown away. So he has his answer. So that night, they both come back to the court. King David announces to the people, most awesome thing happened today, thank God. Let me tell you how we solved this one. And everyone's sitting around, and this, that, and the other. And King Solomon doesn't know that his father, of course, knew that it was his son who actually figured it out. And so King David announces, and this was towards the end of King David's life, King Solomon took over as king at 12 years old. And the Jewish people should know that it was my wise son who showed me the solution to this problem, and so you should rest easy knowing that he's going to be your king, and that, it was his wisdom that helped us solve this, and he'll hopefully lead all the Jewish people with wisdom. And we know King Solomon did lead the Jewish people for a very long time with immense wisdom. Okay. So as we were with King Solomon, Vayeshev Yehuda v'Yisrael lavetach ish tachas gafnai v'sachas te'enasai midan ve'ad be'er shava koil yemei shlema. And Judah and Israel dwelt safely, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, from Dan even to Beersheba, all the days of Shlemai. Dan and Beersheba are cities, right? So Torah itself declares that in the time of King Solomon, when there was a temple, when the Jews were living in Torah and mitzvahs, when we were satisfying our mission, we were in peace. But it's not just we were in peace. The Jewish tradition teaches it was an amazing peace. It wasn't just the nations of the world, like under King David. They didn't want to fight the Jews because they were afraid because King David's going to whip your butt, heaven forbid. By Solomon, by his son, they were mamish, literally so impressed with the Jewish people, they actually had a real desire to help the Jews, to actually be a part of this thing and this temple. And they would come and bring sacrifices, non-Jewish nations, not all of them, but many of them, in King Solomon's temple to God. So it was it's really a Mashiach level, a Messiah level, a piece. It explains Chassidus that hopefully we'll see in our lives very soon. And now in the next class, we're going to go through a little bit of the era of kings, because King Solomon and King David, we just talked about incredible Jewish leadership, the pinnacle. But we have many years of history, right, where that's not what we experienced, where we had many troubled Jewish leaders, and how that expresses ourselves in our time with the land, and our ability to do our mission in this world. L'chaim, l'chaim, thank you all so much. I now want to share one quick thought with you, and then we will be done for today, with God's help. If you could please take one of these and pass it around. I was going to say you can, but I'll rephrase. I would ask you all, please, if you would, take this sheet of paper home with you. It's not homework, it's not nothing. You guys owe me nothing, and we've now completed the class, so thank you so much for coming. But I hope to inspire as best I can, and this is how I often inspire myself, with the teachings of the Holy Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. So let's try to be inspired real quick together. Okay. Envision that the Creator, whose glory fills the earth, He and His presence are continually with you. This is the most subtle of all experiences. So it's a meditation from the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov, by the way, just to clarify, the leader of the Hasidic movement, this was like the first Jewish I don't want to say super hippie, heaven forbid, because he was not a hippie, but relative to what Judaism was used to, he would have seemed a little like not freestyling. You when you guys picture a big rabbi in your head, what do you picture? Straggly beard, the hat, sitting in with books all day. So the Baal Shem Tov was a public speaker. He was a doer of public miracles, much more unique character. And this person did not actually write down any books of his own. His thousands of students, so of his top students, there are 3 books written down in his, I don't want to say his merit. I mean, in his merit, obviously, but meaning in his own words, so to speak, as best as his students could portray it. But in general, we don't have his teachings through books. We have his teachings through the teachings of his students. So, okay. Envision the Creator, whose glory fills the earth. He and His presence are continually with you. This is the most subtle of all experiences. Tell yourself, He is the master of all that occurs in the world. He can do anything I desire. And therefore, it makes no sense for me to put my confidence in anything else but Him. May He be blessed. Rejoice constantly. Ponder and believe with complete faith that the divine presence is with you and protecting you, that you are bound up with the Creator, and that the Creator is bound up with you. With your every limb and every faculty, that your focus is fixed on the Creator, and the Creator's focus is fixed upon you. And the Creator could do whatever He wants. If He so desired, He could annihilate all the worlds in a single moment and recreate them all in a single moment. Within Him are rooted all goodness and all stern judgments in the world, for the current of His energy runs through each thing. And you say, as for me, I do not rely upon, nor do I fear anyone or anything other than Him. Blessed be He. Thank you all so much for joining this class. And with God's help, we'll see you next Thursday at 7 o'clock. But if you have Q&A, any questions or whatever, I promised Q&A, but if anyone wants to go, please, thank you so much. And you're free to go. Questions?
I think your printer's out of ink.
It is out of ink. It was about 2 weeks ago. Ink's very expensive. Yeah, no, but I'm going to get more. We got some. Thank you so much for coming.
I think I missed the point of the
I
story.
don't know if you did know that.
From the beginning?
I mean, like,
No,
I'm curious.
David and his son, was it just that David wanted his son to solve the problem?
Oh, so it's just a nice story, but no, it was mostly that the character, a person, you know, what do they say, real, recognize real? The qualities of David were found in his son. The Jewish people were worried. We had a king. We had the first king. It was a difficult king. It didn't go so well. Our second king, King David, let's have King David forever. This is great. Now his son's coming. Not all sons of every nice guy we know are such nice people. How do we know that the next king is going to be good? This was King David saying that. But the point, again, is that what was King David saying? He's saying that this is my son. You came to see from the story. Like, this is a kind person. This is a wise person. He's you can see the qualities of King David in the son. That was the point of the story. So it wasn't necessarily perfectly entwined with the class, but it was a good story that I thought of that I just wanted to tell. Oh my God.
I'll see you at friend house.
Thank you so much.
I'm not gonna be there. I have to drive at 6 a.m. tomorrow.
How's your week?
Maybe I'll stop out soon.
Apples, I added apples.
See you tomorrow, Katso?
Salmon
Oh, you said you're going home. Okay, but next week.
I always end up like that. Anytime I think I'm ahead of schedule. It's always something taking me right up to the
Okay, say hi to Rabbi Moshe if you're at Chabad. Rabbi Golden.
Probably
Hey, Marshall.
when we were here like 6.
I saw I took a picture.
Oh, there's
I sent it
I guess
by my
I'll
friend.
see your distance.
Yeah.
It's good that I'm sorry about that. I don't know what
That's
happened.
okay. That's okay.
I enjoyed this class.
Yeah, me
You
too.
want to show?
People kept asking me, and I don't want to lose the idea. After I'm taking a picture, I'll put it on the Instagram, and that way it's there forever, and I don't worry about it.
There's a lot of it.
Ellis,
How you feeling?
Marshall.
Have a good
Better?
Thank God. Busy, busy, busy. I was very excited to teach this class. I like King David very much. I like King Solomon very much as well, obviously. But
Are you gonna teach his Tehillim? The scene with the Bathsheba or whatever.
oh, so does that come up in this class? We could do it if you want. I could do a little work with that because because it's good because a lot of people. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, I was gonna say thank you for
If the next Tanya, no, if it happens again, so you're welcome here. But thank you so much. I'll check if it's in here, but if not, so definitely I've read much that the Baba Rebbe says and explains about this story, and to try to help us understand how King David, when we say he sins, it's not the same thing as us. And when we read the story and we think about it in the case, we're like, oh, all right. So King David was like, this lady's very pretty. That's not what happened. It was purely spiritual. King David understood that this person, her spiritual essence and his, were going to bring children into the world that God needed. Turns out it was actually her daughter, and he couldn't see that. He was a prophet, and he wasn't a perfect full prophet like Moses. He saw truth, but he didn't see a bigger truth that would have corrected the choice that he made. So he sends this guy off to war, her husband, who, by the way, happened to be a monster. Not to be rude, but he was not a good guy. So King David thought in every single thing he hit the check marks. This was a good, he thought he nailed it. It was a win-win-win-win-win.
Right.
He did not, obviously, and we understand that retrospectively. But also, it's another one of those things where when you're in the moment. But again, not in the moment in the sense where he was overwhelmed with his physical desire or his inappropriate habit. That was not a part of his situation.
Yo.
He was overwhelmed probably with the positive desire to do what God wanted in this world.
Go.
And he maybe jumped the gun and did it too soon, literally. And then that's in other words, so if he gets punished, it's not a sin like me telling God to piss off because
Okay, I'm gonna stop at Aldi real quick and then I'll
or whatever,
swing on
you know what I mean?
by.
Heaven forbid. Meaning that's it.
I'll try to be quick.
The way we say it for tzaddikim, for righteous people, for a normal person, there's a good choice and a not good choice. Right. For a righteous person, there's a good choice and a better choice.
Right, you know what? I'll just
King David made a good choice, but there was a better choice. And God says you should have known better. But it still made a good choice. That's
yes,
it.
sir.
But we can try it out.
There's another thing with King David that our mother
I'll see you then.
there was wasn't that something happened with his wife's ex-husband?
That's what so the wife's ex-husband who King David sent off to war, so that way
and he died. Yeah.
And so first of all, this wasn't the best person, which is not, he was a very not great person, but also King David thought this was, and again, he was what we were talking about before about being able to apologize. The prophet at the time rebukes King David, and King David thought he was right and he apologized. He was massively upset at the thought that he had done such wrong, and he was willing to make it right, and he was very upset. King Saul, on the other hand, when he found out he did something wrong, he went nuts and he couldn't admit it to himself. So it is, but again, King David, he did, so to speak, wrong, but not not in the same way you and I. He definitely didn't, heaven forbid, murder anybody, right? Like if you and I did that, that's murder, right? If I send someone off to their death because I don't like them, that's called murder. There's no question. In any court of law, even in a Jewish court of law, what David did is not murder. He didn't murder somebody.
It was war.
And it was war, and this person maybe deserved to die on a spiritual level anyway, and King David figured we could do it this way. In other words, he might have still been wrong, but he didn't murder anybody.
Yeah.
He sent that person off to his death in a certain way when he was probably going to die a different way anyway, and it should have been that way, and God says, no, maybe you weren't supposed to intervene.
So he did, did he or did he not know what was it? Like,
No, he wanted him. That was definitely the plan. But it's in other words, I'm not a bad person if I'm the king and someone breaks the law of the land and they're sentenced to death. So executing them is not the bad thing to do. That's the right thing to do. This guy deserved to be executed. It wouldn't have been. It was. You understand? Politics is a very real thing throughout all Jewish history.
And also back.
So King David's supposed to execute this guy who politically, how's he supposed to do it? Plus King David's supposed to marry his wife. It's too many inyanim. So we have him die in war. It's a win-win-win-win-win. And he's a terrible guy. And it's a righteous war. And he was wrong. He shouldn't have done that. But not in the way that we think wrong. And not out of the wrong... In other words, he didn't have a place in his heart where he's like, yeah, I'm going to get this guy. Heaven forbid. That was not David's spot. He literally thought this was the moral correct thing to do. And he was wrong. Yeah. But he thought it was the moral correct thing to do. And not because his emotions had overwhelmed him, because with his seichel, with his understanding, this was the correct choice to make. And then he found that after he was wrong. So he apologized.
He said it was because he knew that he was going to have kids with the wife.
He knew he was going to have children with the wife. This person was a Rosh Hashanah Rishayim. He was a bad guy, and he was already sentenced to death spiritually anyway. Spiritually, this guy was supposed to die. So David's like, perfect, I'll take care of it this way. But it wasn't right the way.
And one of the sons was Solomon, or was that from a different?
King David had many children. One of his kids was King Solomon. Yes,
with that wife though.
I believe so. I'll double check. I believe so. I'll double check. But I think the Messiah himself, Mashiach, is supposed to come from that line. But yeah, so King Solomon as well would have been from that line because Mashiach also is from Solomon. So yes, that was King Solomon's mother. Bathsheba, the woman whose husband was sent to be killed, was did King David end up marrying her, and was King Solomon her child? I'm saying 99% certain yes right now, but I'll double confirm by next class with God's help. Okay?
All right.
Thank you guys so much. Have a great week.
See you tomorrow night.
Noah, did you have another question? Yeah, tomorrow night, right? Yeah.
Wait, so I don't know if I'm just I didn't hear it right, but wasn't the answer really obvious? That the egg was not going to make a chicken because it was already cooked, or was it not cooked?
So, yes, it wasn't obvious to them at the time, for whatever reason. In other words, try to picture it like this. You're a super wise king.
Yeah.
You're going cases. Bring them to me. We got things to do. You're on case 727 of the day. Mm. This guy comes. This is crazy. Wait. So you gave him an egg. Yeah. Okay. You owe him an egg. You didn't give it back.
Yeah.
He could have. In other words, the logic, at the very least, of taking this egg and maybe I lend it to someone and now he owes me 10% on the egg, and then in other words, now I could have made profit off my egg. That logic is very strong. The logic of the egg itself becoming another chicken got lost in the situation, because that was just, in other words, it was such an intense conversation. It's such a wonderfully interesting that the simple fact that cooked eggs don't become chickens, though only non-cooked ones do, got lost. And it was only King Solomon who was like, but dude, it's right there. So everyone in the courtroom missed it. King David, everyone missed it. Not a single person saw it in all the whole kingdom. It was King Solomon who had to tell the farmer, dude, just do this. Oh my God, the farmer got it too. And then King David always started laughing, like, how did I miss that? King Solomon was the one who caught it. In other words, God puts us all in circumstances where we have certain lackings, right? This would have been one of those, right? Like, why did they miss that? God made them miss it, right? Like, you're right, they should have seen it. They didn't. King Solomon did, because God wanted you all to understand you're all lacking in a wisdom that, don't worry, this young man has, and he's going to be your next king.
Okay, that makes more sense.
But that's every story in everyone's life. In other words, that's a very nice example, perfect, because it's a perfect person. Yeah. But like in your life and in my life, the things that God does to us are not to us in the same way that story was not to those two people. See what I'm saying? Like, they felt like victims of the story the whole time, probably. Retrospectively, are they victims of the story? No, they were participants in an incredible Torah lesson that we still use to this day. An infinite Torah lesson. And King Solomon was the essence of the story. And these two individuals were part of that. See what I'm saying? It's much more valuable, obviously, but also...
similar to how David kind of came to beat Goliath with...
All of it. God is the center of every one of these questions. Where my lacking is God. Where my lack of wisdom is God. That's the wisdom that he gave King Shlomo. That's what King David had to offer to begin with. God. All of it. All of Judaism. There's only God. We say in Chassidus, Ein Oid Movado. There's nothing else but him. It doesn't mean that the table, heaven forbid, is God. That's idol worship. We don't bow to tables. It means that there's no table if God doesn't want there to be a table. There's no pain if God doesn't want there to be pain. There's no evil if God doesn't want there to be evil. It doesn't mean the evil is God. It means it's completely not free to do whatever it wants. It is 100% bound by what God allows it to do in this moment. It doesn't sense it. It can't. It's created in such a way where it's not capable of even recognizing that God is in existence. But we know better, and we're supposed to, rather. We're supposed to retrain ourselves to know better and remind the world around us, no. You are, if the Red Sea, yes, the Red Sea acts a certain way, it has its nature, this, that, and the other. But the second the Jews need to get to Mount Sinai, it gets out of the way. It's not that important. Nature is very important. God made the nature, and we need the nature. Until we don't. The Jew is much more important. We're going to Mount Sinai, get out of the way.
We're not tables either.
This table served its purpose tonight, and that's it. It's of course. Thank you, Tim. Yeah. But more than that, like in other words, it's a metaphor, right? It's also real, but like meaning, okay, table served its purpose. Mazel tov to the table. We'll throw a party. No, it means that everything in life, ultimately, every single thought, every ounce of breath of air, can be used for a positive or a negative. And if we can internalize that every single little detail and breath of life and every this, that, and the other, and emotion and thought and everything should be used for that's a very deep, profound, powerful thing.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Awesome.